St. John Hudson USD 350 Board of Education to order. First thing is to welcome all visitors. Camera lady.
Hi.
Principals. Secretaries. Welcome. Is there any additions or changes to the agenda?
We do have one addition. Phil will tell you this. We have some computers that we have replaced, and so we have some that we need to dispose of, and so we'll be requesting permission to sell those to the public. And so we have an agenda item to dispose of excess property.
I entertain a motion to approve the agenda as amended.
Mr. President, I move to amend the agenda to add to dispose of excess property.
Second motion.
Been moved and seconded to approve the amended agenda with the addition of sale of excess property. All in favor, right hand. Opposed, same sign. 7-0. Consent agenda, which is the minutes from the last meetings. And your financial statements and warrants, which is books displayed back by you here. Look at checks.
I move we approve the consent agenda.
Been moved and seconded to approve the consent agenda. All in favor, right hand. Opposed, same sign. 7-0.
It'll be registration fees. Do we have somebody going to the youth conference?
Yes.
Do we always? I don't remember seeing that before.
Fairly often we do.
Cool.
Isn't it Ryan? We usually have
We have
2, 3.
sometimes we have two, sometimes one. It varies.
Yeah.
We usually do have somebody.
Yeah.
Patron comments. All right, we'll move on to our first item of business, the Governor's School Finance Plan.
Start the projector bar.
Hi, Tom. What fruit did Jill have to sell in January and December?
Huh?
Yeah, it's not.
Who has?
Osborne fruit and veggies, what are they growing, or what do they have available to sell in?
Most of that stuff
December.
is like a 3-month delay. Time you submit the bill and it's submitted. Frozen.
I don't know if you, hopefully you've had the opportunity to go through the materials that we sent you on the governor's proposed finance plan for schools. I'm going to be showing you a couple of different things tonight. One is the governor's proposal, but then I'll also show you what KSDE has kind of translated that into. So, to remind you how our current school funding works, we have 4 funds. We have general fund, which is basically our primary operating budget, and it comes from 20 mills of tax that are levied here in the school district. Then also we have a local option budget, which is called the supplemental budget. That also is levied on local taxes, and in our school district, virtually all of the funding for that comes from local taxes. We don't get any equalization from from the state. For example, Stafford County gets, I think, close to 40% equalization for every dollar that they levy supplemental budget, they get 40 cents of that paid by the state. So only 60 cents comes from local. And it has to do with the assessed valuation of the district. They just have a lot less assessed valuation of it. I don't know if it's less oil or quarter land or what it is, but then we also have a bond and interest fund, and then a capital outlay fund. Our capital outlay fund, we currently this year, it is 3 mills, and we have authority to go up to 4. And that's what the board authorized 4 years ago. You actually can authorize up to 8 mills. Some districts do go that high for capital outlay. There are also a number of different weightings that enter in. For example, we get additional weightings for transportation, we get additional weightings for at-risk, for ESOL, for being a small school district called low enrollment. So when you take our enrollment, which this year is about 315, and once you run it through all of that formula, it comes out that we actually, in terms of weighted FTE, it's about 625, 635, I believe. So that is what the dollar amount of $3,780 gets multiplied by that number for our general fund. What the governor is proposing is that we do away with all of those weightings, and you basically just count the number of kids you have, and you take it times that amount, $4,492. Now, some of you in the back of your head may be remembering that number. You may remember what that number is?
That's where it was at the
And before it all started going back.
Statutorily, that's actually where it's supposed to be right now, if they were to fully fund what's in law. So, we're taking all the weightings away, saying we're going to fund you $4,492 per student. They also then are going to have kind of what they call a grandfather clause or a hold harmless, which says we'll make sure that you get the same amount of money next year as you got this year, as long as your student numbers stay the same. If your students' numbers decline, and right now we are using 3-year averaging, so we are going to see a few less students. So the numbers I'm going to show you, the projections, are only for if we have exactly the same FTE of students. Okay, so it takes away all the weightings. It still does provide for a local option budget or supplemental, but it takes all of the cap off of that. Currently, a school district can levy up to 30% of their general fund budget. 31% if they have an election that allows them to go that extra 1%. This would take that cap off, and so districts could go as high as they wanted to go, as whatever they thought the community and public would bear. So that's the first component. This is where it says baseline amount, that's that whole harmless part. But there is a caveat on that. When they started running these numbers, they discovered that some districts receive so much weighting because of being a poor district and things like that, for them to be held harmless, they were going to get hundreds of thousands of dollars more than what they got the previous year. And so they put a cap on it of 6%. So you get exactly what you got last year, plus another 6% if the formula is being gracious to you. There are a lot of districts that they just get exactly what they had before. So some would look at the current funding that we have and say, gosh, that's just really complicated. This is much simpler, and in some senses it is. If this doesn't take into any account, this is one of the criticisms I've heard of it, it doesn't take into account what it costs to put any of the programs on. For example, we get an additional weighting for vocational of half. 50% more for vocational kids, because those programs usually cost more to operate with the equipment and supplies and things like that. This doesn't take any of that into consideration. Transportation is an additional weighting, and so we don't get any additional funding for that. It's all supposed to just kind of come out of that hold harmless part. So this is a simpler finance plan, but it's not based upon what the costs are. And so that's one of the concerns that people have is, if we get into this, if this were to be adopted strictly as it is, there's no provision for increasing funding for inflation rates or things like that. So the cost of things go up, we're basically locked into that unless they change that 4492. So under the governor's plan, and this is really small, so I'll read some of it. We would get, under the hold harmless, we would get about $22,000 more. That's if we had exactly the same number of students, which they have on there at 312, I think, 312.2. And in a minute, I'll show you how some of these calculations are made. They don't show that in here, but I have the same basic thing that KSDE does. It has a little more description to it. So
isn't that number different than KSDE's number?
it is. It's significantly different. So, yeah. Well, I don't have an answer for why it is, but I'll show you what the difference is. So. These are new enough things. We haven't had a meeting yet with anyone from KSDE to have them explain it. This is KSDE's explanation of the governor's plan. They sent this out. They tried to kind of bullet what they saw as being the key parts. Again, students would simply receive $44.92 for each regularly enrolled student FTE. Kindergarten, right now we only do get funding, half funding, 0.5 funding for kindergarten, and that would increase to 1. What that simply means is, instead of counting kindergartners as half a student, we would get to count them as a whole student. I'm not going to go through all of these things down here. One thing on there about the 7th bullet down, it says the local effort must equal the LOB property tax rate in the prior school year to receive 100% of hold harmless. That means the local group, local school district has to at least tax at the rate to produce the same amount as the previous year. So as long as the assessed valuation continues to go up, that shouldn't be a problem. But if something, the bottom falls out of the oil market or something like that, assessed valuation drops, and it has gone up and down pretty significantly a couple times recently, then in order to maintain that and get that hold harmless, you would have to increase taxes here locally.
But it does say rate, so they're not, the rate means the actual absolute amount collected, not just the levy.
My interpretation is as long it has to do with the dollar amount. As long as the dollar amount generated is the same, you wouldn't have to change. And so, yeah, they're describing it as property tax rate. I think they're using those kind of synonymously. Again, it talks about how they can increase the local property tax in order to raise their budget above the formula amount subject to protest petition. One of the reasons that people are speculating that this part is in there is to satisfy Johnson County. Johnson County, Shawnee Mission School District has for years wanted to be able to go more than the 30 or 31% on the local option budget. because they have a lot of assessed valuation, they have a lot of big business and a lot of expensive homes there, so they don't have to have a very high tax rate to generate a lot of money. So they would like to go more than that, because for them, they might only have to bump their taxes by a couple mils to generate several million, maybe even tens of millions of dollars for their school district. But yet they're restricted, and it comes down to the whole idea of equity. Should they be able to spend a lot more money on their kids than other schools in the state are able to spend on theirs? And that's where all the equalization part comes in. So there's some concern that this component in the plan, I mean, part of what the plan the governor was describing was this would help alleviate the problem with lawsuits. Some believe this will actually speed it up, because it's going to create this huge inequity between school districts, which is what some of the previous already settled lawsuits dealt with. And the courts found that, yes, you do have to equitably fund schools across the state. Special education is separate from this plan. Special education has, for a number of years, it used to be a standalone program for funding, and then it was put into the general fund, and in essence, they've taken it back out again. That will stand alone, and we'll still get the funds and all that, but it won't be, in all the numbers you see, it will not include that special ed component. So, a couple of us were talking before the meeting. It says here, a new plan for vocational education is under development. The governor did present something today. I was just scanning it briefly. I don't know the details. There is some additional money that's been talked about, but I don't know how that in the net will work out, because we've been receiving 50% added funds for vocational, and so I don't know how that will fit in with whether we'll actually be gaining from that, whether we'll be holding steady, losing. I don't know. We'll have to see how that plays out. Because the funds are there, but how it's distributed to schools is different. Like you get money when you get a kid certified.
I read a release on this too, and I interpreted it to be a stronger emphasis on them going to a community college to get the certification while they're getting their education at the high school level. So I interpreted it as they would maybe even co-pay the tuition at the community college, and provide transportation funds back and forth. This item here says the final details on bond and interest, state aid for future bond issues has not been determined. The question about that is, in the past, as we talked about, if you're a poor school district, then the state will equalize or help pay some of that. So in our case, we're considered to not be a poor district, and so we don't get any state equalization for LOB or bond and interest. But districts that are considered to be poor do. They may get upwards of 60%. So I think I've seen some as high as 68%, which means every dollar that they levy for bond and interest, they only actually have to come up with about 32 cents in their district. In our district, we have to come up with all of it, because we're considered to be a wealthier district. That is determined by you. They take the assessed valuation and divide it by the number of students. So our assessed valuation has sort of trended upward pretty significantly over the last 4 to 5 years, and our number of students has been trending down. So that makes that ratio get bigger and bigger, and so that's why we do not get any additional state aid. But those schools that would qualify for some sort of equalization have not received that the last couple of years due to budget cuts. And that's why this item is in there. It's not clear on how that's going to work. Is the state going to kick some in or not? The fear is that if they don't have some sort of component like that, those districts that are considered or deemed to be poor districts, in the long term, will slowly decline, facility-wise, because they won't be able to generate the funds to keep stuff up. Because what they put on is a 4 mil rate, may only generate, $40,000 or $50,000 or something like that. And where you have someplace like Burlington or Hugoton, they put 4 mils out there and it generates, $600,000, $700,000, $800,000. Significantly different. So, the last item doesn't apply to us. That has to do with all those districts that consolidated. The way in which they figured their budgets will still remain in effect. All right, this is the explanation of the columns, and I'm not going to go through all of them, but this is the part that is of most interest here, and I'm not even going to try to explain this, but I'll give you the simple explanation. This is averaging averages, is how Dale Dennis described it, to come up with the equalization for districts. You can see what the formula is there at the top, and what each of those means. I've not actually run through and calculated this myself, but you can see an example there. But you have to go back and reference what each of those things means in order to make it work. But that is the formula that determines what that net gain or loss or hold harmless is at the end of all this. Is there anyone that still wants to get a headache looking at that? No, I'm going to move to the numbers. Okay, here we are, 350. And KSDE is showing us at 77,000 in additional funding. Now the only thing I can figure out, and this is just a guess, we've not had a meeting with Dale Dennis or anyone to explain this, is they are using a different FTE in the first column out here. They're using 325.2. And I think what they did when they calculated this is they corrected for the kindergarten students that now count as a whole student. So instead of having 312.2, we have 325.2. So I think they didn't do that in the governor's proposal. So that would be what our additional funds would be. Out there. Under hold harmless. And again, that's only if our enrollment stays exactly the same. The hold harmless clause in this, I think is provided for 3 years. And then after 3 years, we don't know what happens. The whole plan is actually only intended for 3 years. I mean, there's components of it that may continue on, but that's what's being proposed right now. That's the cost that they're running and things like that. So, from just a strictly dollar amount, we would not get hurt by this. From a policy standpoint, I'm concerned that we're being funded not based upon what it costs for different programs. And so, if we have an area, for example, if our transportation costs were to change significantly, we don't get adjustments for that. If we wanted to make that up, we would have to raise local taxes to get additional dollars for that. Questions that anyone has? It is real early.
What's this do for free and reduced lunches?
Well, it doesn't affect free and reduced lunches, but the at-risk rating, at-risk weighting that we had previously is now gone.
So, if food prices would just skyrocket, you'd have to swallow that rise cost, or wouldn't get built in.
I mean, we'll still get reimbursement from the state through the federal government for that program, so.
Is that considered like grant money?
In a way, it sort of is. It's kind of like flow-through grant money. The problem with it is they set those rates for the year, and then if costs go up during the year, you're just stuck. You have to make up the difference.
Currently or in the new?
Currently, that's how it operates. It'd be the same in this, yeah. That component's not going to change. But funding that we had previously received based upon the number of kids that were free and reduced, that will change. And where that is important is there's quite a bit of research out there that shows that kids that come from, in general, not exclusively, that are on free and reduced lunch are more at risk to not do well in school. So that's why the additional funds to provide additional teachers and programming and things like that. But that is all gone under this proposal. So if you have a district that only has 10% free and reduced compared to a district that has 80%, you get, if you have the same number of kids, you can get the same number of money.
Would those kids that have the risk factors typically get picked up in some type of an evaluation that gives them an IEP? And or would they, would that fall into the special education area?
Well, yeah, if they do have IEPs, they'd be under special ed, but in general, the percentages of kids that have special needs are fairly much the same from district to district. You don't see, you see a little bit of variation based upon free and reduced lunch, some, but there's not a direct correlation there. There's some, but not very strong correlation. So, other questions that you have? We'll keep you posted as the legislative session goes on. What I've read is that this will be the first thing that gets introduced to the legislature, whether that, we'll have to see. I can virtually guarantee it won't look like this, but it'll be some sort of combination. I think there's enough momentum out there, perhaps majority of people that are willing to look at doing something different like this, that what we will get will be different. So, but it won't look like this, and it won't look like what we have right now. So it'll be some sort of hybrid in between. So we'll keep you posted as we go along with that.
Okay, ready for item number 2, budget reduction discussion.
And this will be a real short item, but hopefully, as they do start to have these discussions about school funding, we'll start to get some sense about what's going to happen. As long as they are going to continue to do the hold harmless part, regardless of how they change it, then we can forecast what we need to do in terms of budget reductions. If it's based just solely upon how many kids, more or less, we're going to have, we can forecast that. And we have a couple of areas that we can look at that would probably be in the neighborhood of, let's say, $40,000 to $60,000 of reductions that we could make if we needed to. as we go along, probably in, at the next board meeting, I'll talk a little bit more about what those would look like. We really have made a lot of reductions in the last 3 years, so we don't have a lot of room there. But, like I said, depending on what they do with the formula will determine what we might have to look at. So, but we do have some options. I just want you to be aware of that. Normally, we would have started talking about that earlier, like in the November timeframe, to kind of have started going through that, but we're going to have so much uncertainty that I didn't feel like that was going to be productive to do, so.
Okay. Item 3, annual capital outlay review.
Yeah, on your computer desktop there, you should have a file that's labeled capital outlay. And I need to apologize because on the agenda it says annual capital outlay review, and it was annual up until last year, and I have no idea why we didn't do it. We've always done it in January, and we just didn't do it. Hopefully we're back on track here. One of the reasons for doing this is so you can, especially those that are new to the board, and also for returning board members, you can look back and see progress, change, areas that we have worked on. We actually have done, probably Julianne suggested I should put this into a spreadsheet. I probably need to, because it'd be easier to manipulate. I just haven't started in Word, so. But we could then look at totals and things like that. But it gives you some sense of what it costs to kind of keep up facilities and things like that in the school district. And that goes back to the previous discussion we had about how the new finance formula may or may not impact us in terms of whether we will get equalization or not, or things like that. The thing I would like you to, unless you have questions about some of the items that are listed there, the main thing I'd like to have you look at is the possible future projects. These are not in any set order. They're in a little bit of an order, but not a, I didn't prioritize them per se. But these are a list of some of the things that we know we need to be looking at. And there's one or two of them that are kind of more on the wish list side, some are on the need side. A couple of them will probably be coming back to you in the spring with to talk more about. One of those is replacing suburban vehicles. The ones we have are getting to be pretty high mileage, and they get a lot of use, so we need to look at that. Something we've talked about off and on since I've been here is the air conditioning unit in this building. We frequently have to make repairs to it. It is probably terribly inefficient, and we just need to make the change. I have a person that does some of our service stuff is getting some proposals together on what the cost would be to change it out, because it's old enough that we'll have to do a pretty much, I mean, all the ductwork stuff can obviously stay, but all of the piping and the cooling coils and things like that are all, nothing works with each other anymore based on the industry standards and stuff like that. So you can't just change the unit on the outside because they won't work with the stuff that's on the inside. So that could be a pretty significant project to do. We also have some classrooms that we need to look at doing, and we've done some of those over time, as you can see in the list. We still have a few single pane windows around. From an efficiency standpoint, it just works best to get those replaced. We only have a few locations now for those. All of the classroom areas, all the office areas, I think all have been done now. It's mostly just a few hallway areas. We have some of those. And then there's a couple, like I said, a couple kind of wish list things on there. Sprinkler system for game and practice fields, and high school entrance lighting.
What about technological improvements? I know
Technology.
a lot of schools are, I have the perception anyway, a lot of schools are starting to use more smart board type things and,
We have, through the TRC grant, we have some teachers that are starting to do more of that. And our February 20th, or the April meeting? April meeting. We're gonna have a lot of technology type presentations on some of that. Some of it will be our people talking about what they're using, new stuff. We'll also have some people coming in to talk about stuff. I know there's some districts that are moving toward not even using laptops or just using some sort of a pad sort of thing. So we'll have some people come in to talk about that. Sometimes those fall under capital outlay, but we do have a budget line in supplemental for technology, so frequently that's where that comes out of. So it doesn't show up in capital outlay as often it does sometimes. So yeah, we are looking at some of that. And we have, like I said, we have a couple teachers that are working on the TRC grant. That stands for Technology Rich Classroom. And perhaps we would maybe have one or two of them come to talk to the board in a month or two to talk about how that's going. We have 4 teachers that are now, just now, starting to experiment with using something called Front Row, in which there's a speaker system in their classroom. The teacher is mic'd, and I don't know if you're getting any comments from anybody or not. The premise of it is that kids who can hear the teacher well will listen better, will learn better, and that if you look at a regular classroom, the proximity of the kids from the teacher, the greater that proximity is, the farther away they are, the less well they do. And so this virtually eliminates that, because wherever the teacher stands in the classroom, it doesn't matter, all the kids hear the same thing through the speaker system. So we have one in choir room, we have one in a first grade room, we have one in art room, and the 5th and 6th grade classroom. So those are being tried out. So. And you don't have to come up with any ideas tonight, but if there are things that occur to you in terms of capital outlay, please let me know.
Something that I think needs to be added to the list is the tile on the deck is in need of repair.
Yeah.
Some of the stairs are in better need of repair.
Yeah,
There's several tiles that are coming out on the deck.
yeah, and I don't know how they were applied previously, because it's like they pop up from time to time. So, and there's 2 types of tile. I don't know if you're talking about 2 types, but there are 2 types that we have to look at. One is the ceramic tile on the stairs, but then also the what we call it, vinyl tile, or whatever that's on the deck. It's just as old, and at some point you have to replace
Yeah, it's
tile.
just deteriorating.
The deck one, and I'll put that on the list, the deck one will be a little more difficult, in that we'll have to have the asbestos abatement folks come in to seal the area, because those, I'm sure those are 9-inch tiles, so I'm sure they have asbestos in it. It's not friable, but you still have to have a removal team, so. And it's not terrible where it's just a big open flat area like that, so. But we have the same situation in the art room. We just did, over a break, did a couple of, not very expensive renovations in there that really added a lot to the room. Now that used to be the old band room, and it had kind of a fiberglass sort of, I don't know how you call it, acoustical tile on the walls and ceiling that over time it got to looking rough and ragged and torn in places. And it also had about, I think it's 11 or 12 foot ceiling. It was pretty high. So we actually installed a drop ceiling, doubled the lighting, because of how the heat worked in there. We're able to place the heat ducts further out into the room so we get better heating that way. That's also a room that we've done replaced the windows on. It used to be single pane, so the teachers reported that it's much, much more comfortable in there, and the lighting is so much better for them as a result of what we've done with that. The last part we haven't finished yet, where we removed part of that acoustical tile, we'll go back in and apply corkboard so that they'll have a lot of display areas to put artwork and stuff like that at. But that room also needs to have the tile replaced. So I don't know if it's a feature of, in both those spaces, they have rooms underneath them. And so I don't know if that, and they're both locker rooms. I don't know if we get moisture infiltration up through the floor. I know in the locker rooms, those are pre-stressed concrete floors that were lowered in place in sections, and so there are seams. And so I'm fairly certain we do get some moisture from showers and stuff that probably comes up through there, where that makes the floor pop up, I don't know. I know it makes it more difficult for them to work those floors, because when they go in there to like strip the floors and stuff like that, they have to be pretty conservative with the water, because it'll rain in the locker rooms if they don't. So, but yeah, I'll put those on the list. As you're in and around the buildings and see other things, just bring them to my attention. We can put them on the list and talk about when to do them. As you're walking around, like if you're up for ball games or someplace like that, you can look and see where the significant areas are. We still have single pane windows right now, and it's at entrances. All of the windows out there in the main entrance to the high school, those are all single pane. And then all of the stuff across from the choir room in that breezeway area, all of that is single pane. I wouldn't recommend doing anything in the actual breezeway itself, because it's not heated, and so we get quite a bit of air infiltration there just because of how the doors are through that area. But you can definitely tell when you walk by those single pane windows. So I'm going to have somebody come in and look to see if there's some way to reasonably work with the frames that exist to go in and kind of retrofit them with double pane. I don't know if that's possible.
I guess there was something on the alternate floor too. What seems going across there? Somewhere.
Oh, in the cafeteria?
Yeah, in the cafeteria.
Yeah, we can look at that. I'm not.
I don't know either.
We may almost have to see if somebody can come in. What Bill's referencing, terrazzo floors are gorgeous to look at. I always want to be around where they're installed and see how that actually works. But if you anywhere that you have any kind of settling at all, you'll get a break or a seam, and it's hard then to repair it because of how the floors are. We have one of those in the middle of the cafeteria, and so if you have somebody come look at it, my guess is that we'll probably just have to have somebody get a concrete saw and actually cut a channel or something there, and then we'll have to go back in with some sort of a, I don't know, gasping material or something that can expand and move a little bit. So,
Is part of that accordion door off its track? Seems like I remember seeing something put down, but you didn't. You might
No,
look
it's
at
all
it.
it's all on its track.
I mean, it looks kind of rough with
I
the,
think it has a couple places where the plastic part has kind of been torn a little bit.
We did repairs to the roof around the auditorium a few years ago, right, or a couple
We
years ago.
replaced the roof on
And
the
so
auditorium.
the leak isn't an issue, but you still see stains on the interior from when it was, right?
Oh, yeah, we may have some of those. One of the things that's not on the list is we did have, we do plan, once all of the seating is redone, to replace the carpet in the auditorium. We had somebody that left some money to cover some of that cost. There are places where that auditorium carpet has gotten stretched enough that it kind of creates waves, and sometimes people kind of trip as they come down. Plus it's an old shape and range.
the 70. You know that breezeway you talk about having glass in there, would it be more feasible to kind of block it in of some sort instead of putting, putting glass blocks or?
It's all metal frames, so glass blocks would not work in that area. We would have to go with something like insulated board or something like that. It is good to be able to have some visibility there, just from the standpoint of light, but we could look at how we might do some of them, because the insulated panels, I'm sure, would be less than glass. So,
I don't know if, regulations that, our statute changes this year in a more favorable way if, wind turbine is ever an interest to revisit.
we haven't heard anything more on the grant. It's still, I don't think we're supposed to hear about that until in May.
All right, we'll move on to add agenda item, excess surplus property.
We did replace some computers this fall, and the company that we purchased them from was going to give us $50 per unit for them being used computers, and that's pretty much market value for the age of the computers. Mr. Smith had a proposal that rather than incur the cost of having to ship them to the company, probably at a cost of, we were figuring $800 to $1,200, that we just advertise to sell them locally in the community. And so we need board approval to do that.
Is there anything on there
That
that
he
somebody
was-
could get into?
He would scrub them before they went out. They would have an operating system, but that would be it. And we would make it very clear to anyone purchasing them that we do not do technical support.
Well, according to Kim Commando, you can't erase anything off those. Once they're on there, they're on there. It just takes somebody to find it, but
Now, we use, I think Mr. Smith uses something that uses what's called Department of Defense, which it basically writes and rewrites and erases 7 times. So somebody
should scramble at least enough.
Yeah.
What are the computers?
What are they? They are Dell, I can't tell you what the model is. They are a full-size desktop computer. And they would come with a monitor, a flat screen, I believe they are, and keyboard and mouse. It would make, they're not gonna do high-end video games or something like that, but they would do basic word processing and spreadsheets and stuff like that for
Sure.
families. So.
entertain a motion.
I move we authorize the advertising of used computers for sale. Does that cover it?
Can you specify $50?
Oh, yes. At, for a price of $50 per unit.
Second motion.
Moved and seconded to sell the surplus computers at the price of $50 a piece. Any further discussion? All in favor, right hand. Opposed, same sign.
7-0. Communications from board members. Start with you, Stan. You have anything?
No idea.
Carolyn?
No.
Barb? Tom? Bill?
I don't know, I mean, you did that walkthrough.
And we will have an agenda item in February related to that.
You know, how did it go, or?
You were with that. Real well, man.
Some few things in here to address, so.
But you do.
Great. I'll just say I went to this, conference call in December on the special ed co-op, and nothing drastic happening there. Other than the search committee has begun to look for a director for the special ed co-op. Learn more this next month, probably. Administrative reports, we'll start with the elementary principal.
And I believe the report is on the desktop, is that correct?
I actually got it here.
Okay. The numbers you can read, we did add 1 preschool student and 1 first grader since my report in December. So my K4 total is 104, my K6 total 152. The geography bee was held on January 4th, and Patrick Dorn was our champion. Nick Schwain,
Yeah.
I'm stealing the thunder from Mr. Bergman.
Go right ahead.
Runner-up in Kay Roberts, 3rd place. Mrs. Morse and Mrs. Thrasher, an excellent job. It's a very good bee. Dare classes with Officer Fisher at the end for 5th graders. Ms. Friesen asked me to invite you all to the Jump Rope for Heart Assembly, January 18th, 1:30 to 2 p.m. in the South Gym. The bullet where I say we'll include 3rd and 4th graders, that is pre-assembly. The team comes and works with the 3rd and 4th grade students here, and then all of the students come to watch the assembly, and it is open to parents, board members, anyone who wants to come. And then the Stafford County Spelling Bee will be held January 31st at 9 a.m. in the auditorium.
Bergen?
Enrollment, you can see the enrollment totals has pretty much been pretty consistent since we started school. As we get closer here, we just continue to work on getting ready for state assessments, which go from any time from middle of February to the middle of April. This year we test math, reading, science, and social studies in various groups of students. So we'll continue to work on that. We had a high school winter concert that was supposed to be on the 19th, but due to weather, it's been moved to the 24th. So those who were planned at the same time, 7:30, coming to that. Mentioned there about Prom Parents Tournament on the 14th and 15th. Big Winter Classic, as you all know, begins next week. Our high school girls are playing in a tournament at Pratt the following week, at the end of the month. A copy, I should have handed you a copy of the high school activity account. So, questions or anything about any of that stuff?
Who was the 18 that we finally got to fill out?
The 8th team, it was Scott City. We got Scott City JV team, because we were struggling finding a team. We got them, and then here within the last day, we changed that. Wichita West called me the other day, right at the end of school Friday, to see if they could, because I've been advertising that for the whole year, and they saw that we had an opening of it, and I had not taken it off. And so they asked if they could come in. And so I explained to them what was going on, and I talked to the Scott City and told them, and they were understanding, and said if you have a varsity team, then we'll just not come, and you can invite the varsity team, which is really what I wanted, because when if you have a varsity tournament and a JV team participates, then you can't count that as a game. And then when it comes to postseason, it could affect your postseason seed. So it's better in the long run to have 8 schools, or to have varsity schools. I also thought it was better to have a JV team, if we could get no one else, than to have 7 schools and mess up the bracket and have to do something different with the bracket with 7 schools. So that's how it all came about. It was just kind of one of those things. Wichita West thought they were going to a tournament all along until last Friday afternoon when they found out they weren't, because there was a mix-up in there, and from their contract to the contract that was at both schools, so it just faded, I guess. It was one of those things that kind of fell into. That's why it's Wichita West, and they'll just be for this year, and then Nest City will start coming and attending from that point. Yeah. So that's how that came about.
I had 2 things. One, as I've shared with you in other communications, in the process of doing the seat renovation in the auditorium. I think they're getting close to having all of the actual seats completed. We did encounter one snag, and we've already developed a workaround for it, but the seat backs are not all the same size, we've discovered. Been in there literally dozens, maybe hundreds of times, and seen the seats, and lots of other people have too, and they looked at them and said, nope, I don't see anything wrong. And we measured it. All of the aisle seats are about an inch narrower. And it just happened to be that that was the pattern that we took. One of the aisle seats to use. So anyway, so we're going to have to resize the backs, but we've already tried doing one, and that works out pretty slick. So they're all done, you won't be able to tell any difference. So, but they look really nice, the ones that are done. So, second item, I know you've received all the packets on the maintenance concerns, and I did want to thank Tom and Bill for going through the building in December.
It's not ringing a bell.
Okay, I'll talk to you, but you should have received it in the mail.
Okay.
No. Anyway, they went through the building after the December meeting on, I think it was a Tuesday night, and kind of just viewed the building, and they'll have some feedback, I'm sure. We'll have it as an agenda item in February. I have met, part of the request was that there be some sort of follow-up by January 6th. I did meet with the Teachers Association, kind of discussed where we are to this point, what action steps we've taken. I shared personal thoughts, and they talked about next steps. One of the next steps is that we're going to meet with either small representative groups, teachers with individual custodians, just so they can talk and share what their concerns are. Because some of them are specific to classrooms, so we just need to develop some communication there. There were a great number of concerns listed, and one of the things that I did share back as far as what my thoughts was, I said, a lot of things on the list are things that are historical, that happened in the past and have already been dealt with and corrected, and they said, yes, that is true. I think they were just trying to make a point. And I actually had a couple teachers come to me and said they knew about this, but they didn't have any concerns. They felt like they're doing a good job. So I think a lot of it is perspective of individual people, different expectations that people have, and so a lot of it's just we need to establish better and ongoing communications. We had some things in place, we thought was gonna take care of that, and obviously isn't. So we have some groups who are gonna need to do that, and hopefully that will help with that part. So, but as I said, we'll have that as an agenda item in February, so. That's in my head.
Okay. Executive session.
15 minutes.
Let's start with that. And you want who?
The board and myself, and then I have one short item that I had Mr. Burton come in for.
Come back in later, okay. We'll start with Dr. Kenworthy, start with 15 minutes. Motion.
Mr. President, I move that the board go into executive session for 2 minutes to discuss personnel matters, non-elected personnel. Executive session required to protect privacy and interests of identifiable individuals.
Second.
Been moved and second to go to executive session for 15 minutes. Dr. Kenworthy included. All in favor, right hand. Opposed, same sign. 7-0. Been moved and second to adjourn. All in favor, right hand. 7-0. Thank you.